Welcome back to the Between Breaths podcast. I'm your host, Jacko, and I'm going to introduce you today to my dentist. You're like, what? Yeah, that's why are you going to introduce me to this? Well, actually, even better than that, my dental hygienist, who is a combination of Annie and Seb from the Wonders of Wellness. Um, this is as genuine and as organic as it gets, and I want to just be clear on this. There's been nothing other than I finally went to the dentist after a long break from COVID, and we've moved house, which I guess doesn't really change it. Well, I don't have a dentist, and Catherine, aka Mrs. Jacko, aka the Goat, aka Joycey, um, had used this private dentist, which sounds like it's going to be really expensive, and I was a bit against. But they're very like biological dentists, take a holistic, like functional approach to dentistry, looking at the whole thing. So I'm like, okay. She persuades me to go, and I end up having, I think, an hour and 45 minutes with Annie, who you're going to meet. And yeah, I explained this in the podcast. There's just we talked about tongue position, we talked about the airway, we talked about everything I love talking about before we even got to the teeth, but it all made sense as to why that would affect the teeth. And then we got into the teeth, and then, and then we got into all of the stuff. But I came away from that just like in absolute awe and like wow of, and it is, and I actually say at the end what we paid for our appointment, and it isn't that much at all, and it's absolute bargain when you think about the care that you and the service that you get. But it was just an absolute awe. And I came home and I messaged them back straight away saying, I've got a podcast talking about breathing and blah blah blah. I think everyone listening to this would absolutely, to the podcast, would love to hear your perspective on what you do with this holistic approach to dentistry and your emphasis on things like tongue posture, things like how you work on the airway to help clients to be able to breathe better. Because when they breathe better, their jaw functions better. They don't grind their teeth, and their teeth are better, and how it extrapolates all these things. So um, I was in absolute amazement, and yeah, just messaged them straight away and asked them if they come on the podcast, of which they very kindly did. And so this is what you've got to. This was one of my favorite conversations on the podcast so far, and that's nothing against all the fabulous guests we've had before, but yeah, you're in for a treat, because if particularly those of you that are breath coaches, this is fascinating and some really helpful and useful things for you to be aware of about how we can help people work with their airway. And you don't need to be a dentist in order to do that. And yeah, I guess with a lot of the time, our focus with breathing is diaphragm and rib cage, so everything like neck down, whereas this is everything neck up. And it's probably an area where, yeah, I love learning more and more about this, because I don't think traditionally we get taught that much about it. So you are in for a real treat with Annie and Seth from Wonder of Wellness on the Between Breaths podcast. But before you get to listen to those beauties, we have a new additional sponsor to the Between Breaths podcast. And I'm very excited and grateful to HMN24, who produce a number of supplements. The one that I have used for a long time, and the thing I like to do with this, with the podcast and responsive, is it needs to be something that I would use anyway, regardless of whether they've sponsored the podcast or not. So these hydration sachets, the levels of the different salts that are in here, mean that I used to, with my endurance running, get, if I did anything over a half marathon, I would get cramps. And since I use proper hydration electrolyte salts, I don't get any issues with cramps whatsoever. I will have. We did a half marathon today in training, 2 mountains in Snowdonia and a half marathon. One sachet goes in with a little bit of the ketone IQ, because I've said before that goes in the Camelback. That's good for fueling, but the hydration is essential, and it is a basic that we need when I'm training. A full one, if I'm going on a full run with the Camelback on, I'll just use, like, if I'm doing like a strength training session or something, I'll just use like a third of a sachet or something like that. But I utilize these all the time, and I want you to have the opportunity to experience, particularly if you're into your endurance running. You have to have good salts. I'll tell you a story of, like, the guy that won Snowdon 24 last year. I'm going back to Snowdon 24 again this year, but the guy that won it, I helped him with my hydration salts. He was absolutely dying on his last rep, his 8th rep, and it was about just past halfway house, so just over halfway up, and was about to turn round and go back down because he said he was done. And I gave him some hydration salts. We've got 2 flavors. I think I probably had both on me. We got lemon, which was my favorite until I've tried the raspberry. I've been a lemon man, been trying the raspberry recently, and it's good. But anyway, picked him up, literally, physically picked him up, got some hydration salts in him, walked with him for a bit. He was on his last, I was on my last. His last was his 8th rep of Snowdon, my last was my 6th. And he went on to win. And it's fair to say he probably wouldn't have done that if he hadn't have actually got himself hydrated. And it was down to the hydration salts that did it. So yeah, if you're into your training and sports, highly recommend. And there's a link in the show notes. If you use the code JACO10, you get 10% off your Hydrate. Is the product that I use. They do other supplementation products as well, but hmn24.com. JACO10 is the code. Get 10% off your hydration salts. If you're doing any running events or anything, like, they are a basic and a foundation, as foundational as your breathing needs to be. So do check those out. And then also the continued support from HVMN with the Ketone IQ. Like I say, they go in with the hydration salts into my Camelback. Been using these for longer than I can remember now. And yeah, the code JACO20, you get 20% off the Ketone IQ. Or if you go, I think actually the code is just JACO, isn't it? But the link is hvmn.com/JACO, and that 20% discount for the Ketone IQ will get you automatically added to your account. So that's the sponsorship. That's a big thank you from JACO for that. Go check them out if you haven't done yet. They are products that I use. I promised that I would never have something sponsoring the podcast that wasn't something that I use myself and think and would recommend to you. So before we get into this podcast, just some other thing that I would recommend is coming to some of the events that are happening this year. We've got the 2nd of March in Cheshire, cold water, breathwork, sound bath and nature experience with Rooted Life. I will be teaching the breathwork part of that. That's on the 2nd of March. There's still places available. It's probably about the 6th time we've run that event. It's always a sellout event. It's only just a few weeks away. 2nd of March in Cheshire at the beautiful Farm Club. Check out the links in the show notes for that, or you can go straight to rootedlife.co.uk. If that's the cold experience. If you want a warm experience, then coming to Tenerife for the Breathe and Move Tenerife Training Retreat, 21st to 24th of March. And the link again will be in the show notes, but it is at probreathwork.com. 4 days, 3 nights in the summer sun of the UK winter, but of sun in Tenerife. If that makes sense. Basically, it's cold and horrible in the UK. Get yourself to somewhere warm, have some fun with us. We're going to breathe and we're going to move. We're going to have some fun. We're going to eat ice cream. Yeah, that's an unforgettable experience. And then if you're wanting to become a certified Oxford Vantage coach, 2 opportunities for that. We've got the doing it online, which starts on the 2nd of April and lasts 8 weeks. or you can do it in person with me in a retreat style in Scotland, 17th and 19th of May. Details are at probreathwork.com/certification for both of those. Now, no further ado, let's hear from both Annie and Seb from the Wonders of Wellness, because they are absolutely amazing and doing life-changing work. We enter this world taking our first breath, and sadly, we leave this place taking our last. And what I want to do with this podcast is to explore what happens between those breaths. I'm David Jackson, Jacko, and this is the Between Breaths podcast. Right, thank you both for coming on to the Between Breaths podcast. I am excited for the listeners to hear from you both. Just do you want to? It's just Annie, maybe first, ladies first. Just introduce yourself, and then you don't say too much because I'm going to give you a grand sort of intro in a second.
Yeah, of course. Hi everyone. So I'm Annie. I'm a dental therapist, which is kind of like a dental hygienist, in between a hygienist and a dentist. And I'm also a myofunctional therapist. Shall I leave it there for now?
Yeah,
we can talk a little bit more about that as we go on.
Go, no, perfect.
So my name's Seb, Dr. Seb. I'm a dentist, a specialist in biological dentistry and loads of things. I'm sure we'll get into it as we go through. But Annie's the one that does all the real work in this way. I'm just sort of says, yeah, that looks good. So
you've been too kind. Teamwork.
Okay, so I will frame this for the listeners in that about probably only 2 weeks ago, I finally went to a new dentist, which was actually a long way away from where we live now, but everyone will know that this is difficult to get in to see a dentist these days. And it's one my wife had been to before, and she's like, Dave, she calls me Dave rather than Jacko. It'd be a bit weird if she called me Jacko. She's like, Dave, you need to go to here. I know it's a bit more expensive than you're paying with your NHS dentist, but you get looked after properly. And I'm like, okay. So we go. And I saw Annie, and afterwards, sort of immediately afterwards, I said, can you come on the podcast, the both of you, to talk about why the approach to dentistry is so different? So to frame it for people coming in, that people listening will know me in terms of my passion and obsession with breathing, will know that my sort of eyes lit up when I sit there and Annie goes, right, let's have a look at like your palate. Let's have a look at your tongue. Can you put your tongue on the roof of the mouth? Can you do this? How's your breathing? And looking at almost everything before we then got to the teeth. And I think for a lot of people, if they went to their dentist and they started doing that, they would be a bit confused. So maybe it'd be really nice to hear from both of you. Like, I imagine you don't, when you go into this world of dentistry, it doesn't start there. So maybe the perspective of both of you of how you got there, and then we can talk about the whys. And the myotherapy, Annie, be really nice to outline that for people, because I think a lot of people hear that and they sort of think they feel like they should know what that means, but we don't really know what that actually looks like and means.
Yeah, one of those long, complicated words. Yeah.
Sounds good.
So shall I start? Yeah, cool.
Go for it.
So like my journey in this style of dentistry, if you like, started 10 years ago this year, actually. I was working as a dental nurse with one of our mentors, Dr. John Roberts, and my eyes were opened. I'd worked in just conventional NHS dental practices before.
Yeah.
But genuinely, like, we were making such a difference to people's lives. People were coming in and had a course of treatment, or we were supporting them along the way. And genuinely, it was just having such a big impact. And I just thought, I like this. I want to do more of it. So I went to uni and studied and did dental therapy. But have always had, I suppose, this holistic ethos, if you like. The mouth is so disconnected from the rest of like the healthcare system, dentistry is so isolated,
Yeah.
yet like we can have such an impact. We can see so many things that go on in the mouth that are so connected with the rest of the body. It
Yeah.
just doesn't make sense to me why we treat things so differently. So that's, I suppose, where the myofunctional therapy side of things comes into it, because obviously learning so much about the head and neck, the airway, how we breathe, our muscle function, chewing, swallowing, like so much comes into that like space.
Yeah.
And myofunctional therapy is very much I suppose the basics of it are breathing correctly, correct muscle function, the tongue living, working in the right place. And I almost sometimes describe it as, I suppose, a little bit like physio. So we're toning, strengthening,
for sure.
balancing the muscles of the face, the mouth, the throat, the neck. So that includes the airway muscles, the tongue. So yeah, I suppose it's that holistic approach, which has led me to where I am today.
Running the show.
How did you two start, or how long have you two been working together?
5 years,
At
maybe?
least 5 now, yeah.
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 I was a bit later to the game than Annie, so my history is being, I'm not going to go into it 'cause it's a long story, but like being ill probably 10 years ago or 11 years ago now, trusting the medical establishment and antibiotics, antiparasitics, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, it just made me more ill.
Yeah.
And I was
Yeah.
just looking for more answers. And that's what led me to like functional medicine and gut microbiome and balancing of that and, you know, eating well and blah, blah, blah. So anyway, I thought, well, I wasn't even in dentistry then. I thought I always wanted to be a dentist. And my immunologist at the time when I was living in London was like, oh, you should, you know, what you doing with your life, blah, blah, blah. And then I realized, oh, wow, okay, well, I did want to be a dentist. And then I went to dentistry. Anyway, it led me back to this dental field. But knowing what I knew now, I thought there must be a type of dentist that does this type of medicine, you know, in the medicine and dental split. And I was gobsmacked to find that there was maybe 2 or 3 in the UK, and they're all retiring. And it was like, can't believe how much of a void there is. And whether it's the way that they were set up and the governing bodies and this, that, and the other, and the fear of litigation and all of those crazy things. But I was like, you know, at the same time, my wife had airway issues, which we didn't know were airway issues at the time. And she had had 4 teeth, premolar teeth extracted when she was 16 years old, braces, retracted teeth, clenching, grinding, forward head posture, head, neck, shoulder pain, migraines, couldn't work without like a wheat bag on her back and all these ergonomic keyboards and everything you can do. And she was still getting all the pain, not sleeping at night. Anyway, so we went around all of these doctors, medical professionals. Ali, it's in your head. Looked at me. Seb, it's in her head. Eventually found a dentist that said, oh no, all you need to do is expand the airway and
It's like
put
you
the
can't
teeth
breathe.
back in. Yeah, you can't breathe.
Mm.
Struggling to keep awake at nighttime. And for anyone that can't really understand like that perspective, the best way of visualizing it for me is the whole airway tube is just muscular and it's held over by, you know, soft tissue essentially held open. But if you're asleep at nighttime and you've got restriction in the jaw, either through the muscle tone and the things aren't living in the right places, it closes the airway. When you're asleep and the only thing that's moving is your diaphragm, the suctioning of the diaphragm pulls the muscular tube shut. You have to clench, grind, move your jaw forward, mouth breathe, all of these things that cause fight or flight, right? And we don't want that activation. When we're asleep, we want true nasal breathing. We want great muscular tone. We want good lower jaw position to open up the airway. And we want to not be clenching, to be in fully rest and digest. And she was not getting that. So anyway, that was my journey going back into, and that was obviously very close to my heart. And I saw a change, have no more migraines, you know, have more energy, you'd be able to work more, focus more, you know, because she definitely had burnout at that stage. And, you know, it's been an absolute transformation to see what she's doing now, how much energy she's putting into our business and, you know, running everything. It's just, you know, absolutely unbelievable because I know how she was 10 years ago. But yeah, we get taught the conventional way at uni. So I went back to uni as a graduate because I'd already got a degree. And I did an accelerated course where I could work in just the NHS dental practice for 3 years, basically providing standard care. and I was shadowing John the whole time. So probably from like 2016, I was just like learning.
Yeah.
So that's when we actually, so it must have been 2016, 17 then we met, Annie, wasn't it?
Yeah.
There you go. And we were going on the conferences together, going down to London together. So I was learning the bio way at the same time as the conventional way, knowing
Okay.
well that I did not want to do the conventional way.
Yeah.
And then
No,
I went straight to work for John. That was it.
yeah, no, it's really interesting to hear that, like the perspective you were saying, Annie, how the dentistry is separate from a lot of things, but in a lot of conventional medicine, everything's sort of separate from each other. But dentistry being separate, I understand where you're coming from on that. But then at the same time, what you're saying, Seb, is that almost the person looking in the mouth and getting in there. And I mean, I wouldn't want to do that as a job. I'm like, I've got a friend of ours that she's just retired from being a dentist, and I was like, in the end, she like didn't like it. I was just like, yeah, you're just like looking in people's mouths all day. I was like, anyway, but they're actually being in a great place, like the place, to actually know what's going on with the airway. And when I sort of shouted, and whilst you were giving your story, Seb, of like, you can't breathe, because when I say, sometimes I see it with sports people, and they could be playing international sport, they could be very high level, and I would observe, and in my head I'm not saying it out loud, in my head I'm going like this is amazing in terms of you can't breathe. And when I say you can't breathe, it's not that you can't actually breathe. The body is amazing at adapting, and everything that you said, Seb, that your partner, your wife, was feeling was like the body's way of like managing with this stuff that was going on, and it keeps us going, and it's like we feel all the pain and the discomfort things. Sometimes I look at stuff now like that and go like, wow, isn't it amazing? The body just like manages to keep going. Okay, it makes some of these things, but like you're basically not breathing. It's not that we're not breathing, but that thing that's so fundamental to life and everything else in terms of being connected to the nervous system and yada yada. So with the notion of you guys and girls are in one of the best positions to look at someone's airway, and maybe not because we can actually see the airway. So I got into breathing because I had a brain injury ended my rugby career 11 years ago. And with a brain injury, until you scan it, they can't see the brain. So most of the time they don't scan it that often anyway, and they don't want to scan it. So it's like an injury that we can't see. Like the airway, even when you're trying to look down there with your things, like there's only so much that you can see. My experience was you were looking at other features, and it would be really nice to hear what those are, because a lot of people listening to the podcast would be breath coaches like I am. I don't like looking inside people's mouths, but I now like looking at people's smiles, and I can't help but I look at their teeth, and I get annoyed at everyone's who's, my teeth aren't straight, my palate, my face isn't, and Annie had a good look inside it, but and was very kind and very complimentary. I was like dreading the worst because I don't think I'd been to a dentist since COVID. Anyway, what are some of those things that you're looking for that's giving you indicators as to how someone's airway is, and then maybe and how their breathing potentially is, because that's going to be really useful for everybody that's involved in breathing. You don't have to be a dentist for that to be important and helpful.
And well, we've spent quite a bit of time developing like protocols
during COVID, eh?
Yeah, literally like screening protocols to look for all of these things. I
was going to ask for you, sorry, let me ask just a slightly funny question. Is there any pressure? Do you feel the pressure of your own teeth? Because
as in people looking at our own teeth.
Well, yeah, because like it's like,
I do. So one of the things that we'll talk about now, like thinking about airway, is tongue ties and looking at tongues. And I feel super conscious because I have the world's biggest tongue tie.
Right, okay.
which
But we're going to get rid of it soon. Don't
We're
worry.
gonna chop that
yeah,
off.
and I'm kind of putting myself through my own little program of myofunctional therapy, like in
Okay.
preparation to actually have my my tongue tie released. So maybe we'll start
Okay.
with tongues, hey?
Yeah, go on, yeah.
So like tongues, for example, are one of like the first things we look at because tongue ties are super common. Lots of people have tongue ties. There's a lot of talk like why do we look at tongue ties? Why is that potentially an issue? The most commonly like seen or found, you hear about it with little ones
Yeah.
in terms of feeding and struggling feeding, and if
Yes.
there's a tongue tie, because the tongue physically is being held to the floor of the mouth
And
by
what
this.
causes it? Like, why do some people have? Yeah, why do? Is it
There's
just
not an exact science, really. Some people say about the MTHFR gene. Some people say premature babies. Some people say folic acid instead of folate. So no
Okay.
one really knows, unfortunately.
No, but they're
Genetics
not.
as well, right? As well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they're not
D-
particularly like routinely checked for though.
Yeah. Are you more likely to have a tongue tie if like your mum or dad had one, for example?
We think so.
Yeah,
You see families
yeah.
where it runs in the family, definitely.
Yeah. But there isn't
Mm.
that data sort of, that's more what you're seeing rather than there isn't
Exactly.
anyone really studying it.
Yeah,
No, not massively.
yeah.
What does
yeah.
Zaggy say about it? Just thinking about that. Do you know? You probably delved into that research more.
From what I've read, there's potentially a genetic component to it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's nothing that conclusive that I've seen.
No.
No. But one of the other issues with that, like, so we think of tongue tie and feeding problems, and quite often, if that's the case, they'll just snip the tongue, fine, there you go. But actually, there's a lot of other potential issues with tongue ties. A being that if that tongue can't live or get up into the roof of the palate, that's going to be one of the primary growth factors for really growing and developing, particularly the upper jaw. So because I have a tongue tie, it meant that I was a mouth breather and it's taken me quite a bit of like training to, I suppose, transition to nasal breathing. But it also means that because I was breathing from my mouth and because I have a tongue tie, my tongue has never comfortably lived in my palate.
Right.
And as a result of that, my palate is quite narrow and my tongue kind of struggles to sit up there. So that's definitely one of the things that we have a little look for. And another thing that kind of ties in with that is, like we were talking before about compensation. If a muscle is perhaps not performing quite how we want it to, if it's lacking that tone or flow, other muscles will compensate for that.
Yeah.
So we see it a lot, for example, children or people when we swallow, there's a lot of facial movement. And that's because the tongue is lacking the tone. The tongue should do all of the swallow. The face should be completely relaxed. So it's looking for things like that. So like watching people as they sip their water in the waiting room, and are they sat there like reading a book with their mouth open?
Yeah. So the assessment starts before we've realised it started.
Yeah,
That's always a
before
good.
you
It's
even
the
know.
same with breathing. It's the best way. You've got to assess someone before you can see. I've not really thought of swallow. I've looked at some tongue stuff a bit, and it's. I feel like it's an area where you could probably devote your entire life to just the tongue, and you'd still like be finding out. But I like really sort of simple, rational, obvious things. So when you said then, if someone's finding it hard, if someone's using more, like almost like the whole of the body to like actually try and make that swallow happen,
Yeah.
clearly there's a compensation pattern. The thing that I got like before I was in breathing, I was like coaching as a strength and conditioning coach. So more musculoskeletal system as a whole, and getting people strong and fast and what have you, and negating all of the important muscles like the diaphragm and the tongue, because we weren't taught about it. But the principles of like, if something's tight, it's probably weak, and if something's weak, something else has to try and help support what that thing's supposed to be doing. And all you're saying is that's exactly the same thing that's happening with the tongue muscle, and that to me is just like, it just feels totally obvious.
Logical.
But
makes sense.
and I feel like there should be more collaboration of people in different fields, like sharing their principles rather than the minutia that we then actually get, because then we're looking at the body as a whole through how we all understand it from different angles, but we all, what are all those common like principles and themes that come through, because that's us looking at the body holistically. And that was one of the things that I felt, that there was two things that I felt when I sat down in the chair with Annie. One was that, okay, she's looking at this whole thing holistically. She's not just looking at the tooth that I've got missing when I had a root canal and it died and they had to be pulled out. And the other thing, to looking at it holistically, the other thing was just genuinely felt cared for in a, don't take this the wrong way, but just in a slightly weird way. In that my dentist before, like, he was all right and he sort of cared, but you know, not really. Joe, it did, but he did. He wasn't going to do any harm to me, but it wasn't so that, because it never had that. A lot of people find being in the dentist chair like intimidating, and it is. I don't really get anxious about things. Deep water I don't like, and probably the dentist chair, like those things, like it does make me feel anxious. And so it was because I think because it was so refreshing, it was like, it felt a bit weird, because it was like, you're not supposed to spend an hour and a half with me and actually care about the decisions on what you were going to do and suggest that we do, and what care my mouth needs was based on, it felt like you caring about me as a human and holistically, not just going, oh, a good example would be like, so I could have something in the space that I've got from a missing tooth, and options were all these things that were putting something in there that wasn't natural. And when I said, but what does that do for, like, even the idea of, like, if there's a hole there, is it going to close up? And my previous dentist, and this isn't me bagging someone that's more traditional, in that it's just that they hadn't been taught it. And if you haven't been taught something, you don't know it. It's not your fault for not knowing, potentially, or we can argue about, but it wasn't it. I'm not blaming it. But it was just like, no, be all right. And it's like, and I'm literally going like, but I think it might not be all right from the little bit that I know. Like, but anyway, yeah. So, tongue.
Yes. So yeah, that's one of the main things. We also see like dimpling in the side of the tongue, scalloping tongue.
Yeah.
I'll pass over to you, Seb. I'll hand the baton over. I'll let you reel some things off as well.
Yes. So essentially, the space of the tongue is dictated by the cage of the mouth, right? And if the mouth and the cage is small, for lack of growth and development, young, genetic, tongue tie, function, orthodontics, which is removed teeth, or mouth breathing, for example, and the top jaw's coming down and it's trapping that lower jaw back, that cage in the mouth, the tongue doesn't change size. In fact, the tongue probably gets bigger a lot of the time if it's not being trained properly. So when the tongue doesn't change size and or gets bigger, guess where it blocks? Because there's no room in the cage. It bulges at the back of the throat, which blocks the nasal breathing pathway. So we see that scalloping around the tongue when the tongue is pushing forward to try and help the person breathe at night, because the airway is collapsing and the tongue pushes forward, opens the airway. So when we see severe scalloping, we know someone's close to sleep apnea type, symptoms, which is things like, migraines, headache, all the things that Ali had, but also not being able to breathe at all, and their oxygen sats are dropping at night, and they're fighting for their life. Their cardiovascular system is going crazy. So that's the extreme end of the scale.
How common would it be? So how common would it be for someone to have a level of sleep apnea but actually not be aware that's happening?
Quite common.
Pretty common.
Okay, so by looking at the tongue, you see the indentations on the sides of the tongue that sort of suggest that is probably happening.
Yeah, and so there's the sleep apnea, which is extreme medical condition, right? Not great for your body. There's the bit in between, which we call sleep disordered breathing and upper airway resistance syndrome. And that's the things that your body does to compensate, which causes more symptoms. So that's either clenching the teeth, grinding the jaw forward, mouth breathing, or just simply not being able to sleep. You've got insomnia, or you can't, your body doesn't want to sleep. You don't rest and recover. You get, I'm even convinced that some of the low-grade chronic inflammatory things going on, like, the fibromyalgias, the MEs, are just through a lack of good quality deep sleep with regeneration happening at the core.
Yeah. And that's going to affect that's going to affect like oxygenation of tissues, the brain, everything, right?
Yeah.
Significantly.
Where do you me and Annie didn't discuss it in my consultation. I've been interested in, because I sometimes have had one recently actually that was like, and I didn't want to go down there because it's also not my area, let's say. So it's like, if that's what they're doing, that's what they're doing. But wearing a mouth guard because they grind at night, like, is that something, to me, I'll put it out there, I'll put out my view then before you tell me I'm probably wrong. But for me, I sort of see it as like, at best, it's something you're going to do in the meantime before you sort out what the actual problem is. It just feels like you're just putting something in between so they don't actually grind. It's not stopping the problem.
Exactly. We're trying to move away from them as well, but like
Okay.
you say, some people need them, and
So you might use them as an interim.
yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, it's hard, isn't it? Because everyone's coming at it in different angles, and we were originally taught that you build on the lower jaw, so never do anything on the top jaw gum shield ever, because that traps the lower jaw back. It's trapping that mandible, trapping the airway more. So you want to gum shields on the lower, bring the lower jaw downwards, forwards, which in turn opens up the airway, which is what we want, right?
Yeah.
But we were taught, start with 1 mil, build to 2 mil, maybe 3 mil if it's an extreme deep bite or crowding, and then balance the bite and make sure it's evenly contacting, which relaxes the nervous system, because you have two massive trigeminal nerve ganglion connecting all your teeth, which feeds back to the brain balance. So if that's not in balance, you're not going to sleep well either. So that was how we were taught. But then we learned more about the myofunctional stuff, which is what Annie is obviously really striving with. And this is that we were just correcting the skeletal structure. We weren't looking at what was within the mouth and how toned the airway was, and where the tongue should live in. So then that's when Annie comes in and tones and strengthens and lengthens and stops the collapsibility. So not only are you getting the structural bit, but you're also getting the soft tissue, the airway space is increasing and not collapsing. So the tone is better.
Yeah.
But then since we've done that training, we've even now moved into functional appliances to sleep in, which basically just support the airway massively, which is like these silicone devices that hold the jaw open. It's better because it's not plastic. It reminds the tongue where to live, and it stops it from falling low. So it's like all in one, really, isn't it?
Okay, nice. Do you ever do mouth taping to ensure
Every
nasal
night.
breathing?
Every night.
I do every night, yeah.
Yeah.
And if I forget, I can tell the difference.
And do you tell your patients to?
Yeah, it's
a tricky subject for some, because some will think you're a psychopath. They're like, you're trying to kill me, right?
Especially if they've not heard of it before.
Yeah, depending on where they've come from.
Yeah, I assess how good their nasal breathing is. If this is somebody who is chronically congested, who really struggles to breathe through their nose, is very laboured, I don't recommend it straight away in those situations. But if someone can comfortably breathe through their nose and it's more of a habitual thing, then I think it can be a really helpful tool. And yeah, the feedback that patients give and how they feel when they wake up in the morning. I mean, the way that I feel alone.
Yeah. What about because my view on it is, I would like to think that I can make the tangible and long-term changes to the subconscious breathing and the airway and everything, so that I don't have to tape my mouth. It just stays closed when I'm asleep. Would you like? Yeah. But then why are all three of us still taping our mouth at night is my question.
I know.
I haven't got the answer, but that's what I feel should be the process. And I mess about sometimes and don't tape it just to see how I get on. And I still, make these weird snoring. It's, if I don't tape my mouth now, it's better than it would have been in the past. But there's a still high chance that I'd snore and make weird noises.
It's interesting. Whenever we do any sort of myofunctional therapy and look at toning and strengthening these muscles, like the first stage is always nasal breathing. Let's get the breathing right first, and building that like CO2 tolerance almost. Let's make it so that particularly with children, as we do a lot of like myofunctional therapy and make these into like fun activities and exercises. But like this is for kids in particular, one of the first things that we look at.
Okay,
My
well, go on.
my thoughts on that is that not obviously, do you know about the Western A price stuff? You know, the diet, the nutrition, the
Yes.
living close to nature, the farm to table approach, the K2, the ADE, all those vitamins, the indigenous diet that we used to have with eating the bones and the hard things. Not many of us have 32 teeth in our mouth with a really, really wide airway shape, arch shape. Most of us have collapsible nostril valves. Mine was boxing, broken and fixed it, but didn't really fix it. So for me, one of the biggest things that I recommend to my patients is actually sleeping in nasal dilators and hold the nose open. And then I reckon you could get away with not doing mouth tape, because that's an aspect of it. But if you haven't got that super wide jaw with the tongue living perfectly in the roof of the mouth, out of the airway space so you can breathe, totally gold standard is you shouldn't need it, right? Because the airway's open. But I just don't take that risk anymore, especially when I know how much I've got to work and focus. I notice a difference. And sometimes in the morning, if you're on the weekend, you get up at like, my normal time is 6 a.m. and I get up at 6 and I thought, oh, I've got nothing on today, I can have a little rest. I'll take my tape off, go to the toilet, and then I'll go back to bed. I'll wake up 2 hours later, my mouth will be dry. I'm like, how can this be possible, right?
Well, I've been on holiday before with other family members, and walked downstairs and then seen someone in the kitchen, my sister-in-law, and like tried to say hello, and then realized that my mouth tape was still on. Because what's really interesting is that I just sort of said about the mouth guard and went, the guard to stop you grinding your teeth, that's like, it's not solving the problem. And then just talked about mouth tape, which is the same thing, but just something that then will help. And I think something that a lot of people listening to the podcast will be interested in, because we don't get taught it, is the toning of I really like the sort of what you did with your hands, Seb, when you said like how the actual airway and the diaphragm, when we're lying and we're sleeping at night and it pulling down, it's actually, if we don't have the tone, it's going to like suck and it's going to close off that airway. Is it easy enough to describe some basics for someone that can either check or assess themselves of like, do I lack tone in that area that's actually creating the airway muscularly? And is there a go-to exercise, or is there a few things, or how easy is it for someone is it possible to explain something on a podcast so someone can maybe actually do an exercise?
There's a nice analogy to like describe that that might help to like visualize it almost. That, if you had like a really thick smoothie and you had one of those like rubbish cardboard straws and you try and suck up the smoothie and it just collapses in on itself, the straw, doesn't it? It's really annoying. Now, if you had a metal straw and tried to suck the smoothie up, there's no way that's going to collapse in on itself. So structurally, the walls, if they've got more integrity, they can withstand the mechanical pressures of breathing.
And is it just muscular tissue that is the airway supporting it?
So the most common place this is happening is like it's like the soft tissue area, but it's such like the neck, like there's so much going on in that small space, isn't there?
Yeah, it's definitely the oropharynx, which is the bit behind the tongue. And that's why the tongue living in the roof of the mouth, out of the airway, gives you more airway space to breathe. Because if you're low, it bulges back, narrows the airway.
Yeah.
The other thing that's a bit crazy is your tonsils, right? And adenoids. And if people are chronic mouth breathers and those things are filtering much more than they should be, guess what? They get bigger, don't they? So then when they get bigger, it blocks your airway space. Such a painful process. But, this is a bit random, but I've seen patients that have gone on good detoxification programs, lymphatic drainage, whatever else it is that they've been doing, their tonsils shrink and they're breathing properly. So you can reverse that, because a lot of the time, unless it's sleep apnea and they're fighting for their life, we don't really recommend them getting removed unless there's a real ENT problem, because the other question is, what do they do in the body, right? From a holistic perspective, are they cleaning the blood, blah 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 blah. But it's yeah, the other thing is the head posture, right? So the weird thing is if you're sticking your head forward, even though it helps you breathe when you're awake, when you sleep, that spine is then bulging forward. So then that spine actually will then be more collapsible because you're constantly stretching. It's this really weird subconscious thing. And the easiest way of thinking about it, you can almost make yourself snore if you get into a really bad position. You try and breathe through your nose, right? You go, this is your head going back, and you go, yeah, I'm snoring. But then I'm in the same spinal position, but I move my chin forward. I can actually, it's a recovery position, right? You lift the chin up, you open the airway. But people, because they have a narrow airway and from all these compensations that they're making, they subconsciously, their brain compensates by telling them to lift their head forward so they get all the shoulder pain. But when you sleep and your head's constantly forward during the day and it goes back to flat, it collapses straight away. So even the spinal position of things can impact where the bulges are in the airway and the narrow parts are.
And because you're lying and you're relaxed on your pillow, you're then you've got nothing to support.
Yeah, gravity obviously works against you. So I actually sleep on a 3% incline bed, so my airway doesn't collapse as much. And you can do that quite simply by getting some like books at the bottom of the headboards or whatever.
So your head is slightly higher than your feet?
Yes, exactly.
You don't just slide out of bed?
Kind of.
You got like some sandpaper on there? Is it you got rough?
Yeah. Well, since we've been doing it though, you do notice that the cover goes down you a little bit, so you have to pull it back up.
Well, my cover always goes to the side where the missus is on. I don't know what, maybe we're on a slant at the side.
Yeah, maybe that's true.
It's a bit of a fight.
Something's really crazy though that I want to touch upon here that, you know, Annie and I find fascinating as well. And the whole tongue tie thing, right? That fascial connection runs from your tongue all the way down to your big toe. So you can actually Google this and watch a dissection on YouTube or whatever. And the main aspect is it goes to the diaphragm. So people that are super tight in the tongue struggle to diaphragmatically breathe, right?
Yeah.
But also it goes down to the fascia in the feet. So plantar fasciitis is like one of those top things that comes from tight fascial connections as well. The other weird thing is that if someone's asleep at nighttime and they're in deep sleep, not REM sleep, not light sleep, deep sleep, the only thing that's moving is the diaphragm. When the diaphragm pulls out to breathe deep, tongue comes down, blocks the airway, boom, you've got sleep apnea type symptoms again. So that's why the tongue tie is quite important for it to be moved independent tongue release, when the time is right, after the myofunctional, to get it living up in the airway space in the roof of the mouth, but also not being pulled down when you sleep. Because
it's got to be strong enough to stay up there to stop being pulled down.
Yeah, that's number one. But then also releasing the connection underneath the tongue if it is too tight.
If it's too tight, yeah. No, I love it. So Annie, is there, or both of you, I don't know if is there something that people can try to check and then maybe do in order to work on that airway, the structure, like the structural support of it through some sort of therapy. I'm trying to imagine like I don't know. I'm trying to imagine like I've got elastic bands I'm pulling around,
some
like
resistance bands.
What am I doing?
Is it?
Yeah. I don't know, because people do. There is all that type of stuff out there.
Yeah. No, definitely. Well, the first thing is like being conscious and aware of these things. So having a little think like, where is your tongue in your mouth? Like right now, as you're listening, is it in the roof of your mouth? Is it in between your teeth? Is it in the floor of your mouth? So being aware of that. When you're chewing and swallowing your food, when you're taking a drink of water, have a little think, how are you swallowing that food? Do you feel like you need to use a lot of your facial muscles, that kind of thing? If you feel like you're clenching, grinding quite tight, so these are all kind of like symptoms. Tooth wear, like if you feel like your teeth are quite flat and grinding down, that's something to be mindful of as well.
How often are we supposed to be swallowing?
It varies a lot. Like I can't remember the exact number a day. Hundreds of times a day.
I think it's 800 to 2,000 depending on the person.
Yeah. So it's a lot. So if that swallow is I say incorrect. If the tongue isn't doing what it should be doing and we're having to compensate, those muscles then pushing in on the teeth
Are
can
doing a lot of work.
have an impact as well. So like crowding sometimes through like chin muscle having to work too hard, or even like the jaw being like pushed into a funny position every time we swallow. So they can have like knock-on impacts on our face and structure and muscle tension and that kind of thing. The main goals of treatment, ultimately, we break it down into 4 simple things. So nasal breathing, tongue living in the correct place, so up there in the palate, the roof of the mouth, and the whole tongue, not just the tip of the tongue, all the way to the very back of the palate. Swallowing the correct way, so without the compensations, and lips together at rest. Like those are the main aims of treatment. Moving on to like I suppose the airway side of things and how to strengthen the airway. Seb has got some great videos on Instagram that have gone viral that you can check out. But
okay, well, we'll link some of those in the show notes for people. Yeah,
but even like just like clicking the tongue, sucking the tongue into the palate, suction it and stretching down. And you can, if you do these kinds of exercises, lip pops as well. If you do these when your head is tilted, so imagine you're trying to hold a pencil in the back of your neck and repeat those exercises, you will feel the muscles in and around your neck, the floor of your tongue. You'll feel those muscles working a bit more. So those are maybe targeting perhaps like your airway muscles or the muscles surrounding your airway a little bit more as well. But we've developed like we kind of run an online course, don't we, Seb, that kind of it kind of breaks down each of the muscle groups.
So someone can follow that. Is that do you follow it at your own pace, or is it like a thing taught live? How's it done?
So it's go on, you go.
No, I was just going to say, it's one of those ones that you can't just say, "I'll just sign up to the course," because we kind of check for sleep apnea-like type symptoms on a little consult first, just to make sure that person is going to be safe enough doing this without,
great,
under the consult of a doctor. But then after that, it's a course that's pretty much run by Annie. She's the myofunctional therapist, checking the exercises every 3 months with the patients. But then we've created like on-demand videos to be downloaded. But we've tried to make it pretty sciencey, right? Because we get our patients taking photos at the beginning every 3 months so they can track the changes in their teeth, because things do shift around.
So do you see structural changes in people's, like, like in James Nestor's book in both, he talks, I mean, he a lot of work with retainers, but you see without retainers, just with this work, you see structural, like tangible change that you could see in a photo?
We use special devices that keep the muscular tone off of the teeth and the tongue from touching the teeth. So pretty quickly, you'll see the lower teeth start to straighten up. And it's really quite amazing, actually.
Really? Wow.
In kids, this is where we're super passionate about. Kids between 6 and 12, if we can functionally change their habits before they grow, they don't need braces. They can get to their teeth in their mouth. We look at the tongue tie, we release it so the tongue can get up and grow in that top jaw. It's that's the real passion. But in adults, we normally say to adults, don't expect tooth changes because we can't guarantee anything. But you will get airway support, at the end of the day, and better sleeping.
Yeah. Oh, fantastic. So we'll put some links in the show notes so people can find those viral videos, as well as I guess they would have that consult if before then getting access to the stuff just to check that. And that's the care that I talked about.
Call. Exactly. Definitely want to point people in the right direction, for sure.
And I forgot to say at the start, actually, but it's nice to sort of mention it here at this point, to say, I think I said my wife was like, look, we're both going to go. She'd already been. If it was like, it is more expensive than you was paying your NHS dentist, but the two of us went, and I think we paid a little bit over 200 quid between us. So it was only a little bit over 100 quid each. And I was like, I was in there for about an hour and 45 minutes. I was like, this is crazy. This isn't expensive. This is like, I just wanted to say that so that people listening just have an idea of, like, actually price point of these things. You're not spending hundreds. I mean, depending on what work and things you need to do, but in terms of being checked by someone that's going to check everything and by people that care and then are going to do the right thing for you and your mouth and your breathing and your teeth and everything. I was wondering, do you guys make any money? I was like, no, I don't want to get into a business conversation. But I was just like, very, very. It's not very often these days that you go to something and you have a complete experience of like customer service, customer care, and then quality of the thing you actually have. It's just very rare. So, and I also wanted people to know, because some people will think like me, even my sister. So we bought like a sauna for a home, and my sister's like, "Oh, did you get it for free?" I was like, "Get it for free? No, like just because just because she thinks she got some Instagram followers, it's like doesn't." And I wanted people to know that we're not having this conversation. This conversation isn't do me some free treatment and you can plug yourself on the podcast. This came about of like I was immediately in awe of the service you were providing, and I knew from the conversation and the appointment I had with Annie that people would really love to hear what you guys have got to say in the perspectives that you give. So I just want to say a massive thank you from me.
Oh, that's an amazing experience, because we worked hard since November to try and shift things, the feel of the practice, the energy of the practice, the speaking to patients, and obviously Annie and I have been doing it for a long time now, so it really, and now our passion is training other dentists, right, to do this, and we've got 3 dentists already at the clinic that started towards the end of last year, which is amazing. Thank you, social media and all that, because that's helped people bring awareness.
To find it, yeah.
Absolutely. And now Annie's striving forward, and she's even, well, you tell about your conference. We're trying to educate more dentists in the UK, right?
Yeah, no, definitely. And it's spreading the message and like getting the word out there. So yeah, in June I'm running a conference. Health starts in the mouth is the tagline.
Nice. Is that the name of the conference?
Yeah, Health Starts in the Mouth 2024. It's going to be in Manchester. But it's on all things like oral systemic health. So a huge part of it will be this, like airway, sleep, breathing.
Yeah.
And then another huge part of it is oral inflammation and systemic health, because the research coming out on that is huge. And there are so many links. Like it really is like a mirror for the rest of the body, like what we see in the mouth. So yeah, a conference to kind of raise awareness for it, other dentists and other dental professionals, but also just anyone who works in, I don't know, healthcare, wellness. Like if you are, supporting people with the body, then chances are you need to have a little bit of an understanding about how the mouth and what goes on up there might affect the body and vice versa.
Well, I think in terms like breath coaches will be wanting to be like the type of people that go in to teach breath tend to be, well, from my experience, like I've got a lot. I teach the Oxyvantage certification, so there's a whole cohort of people that I've taught that I have like a mentoring group with them and ongoing like education stuff, and they're all the people that gravitate towards it, like they just love soaking up information. We just want to know more, and it's like you've found out that. So exactly that this conversation where we've gone to with this, I hope people have got some things that they can think about and take away. But I can imagine people. I would like to come, so I imagine there'll be people that, from the breath space, particularly if you haven't like pushed into that for like, there'll be a lot of people very, very, very much interested in learning more about that, because the mouth, the nose, the airway, like that's
well, everyone is very welcome, and it would be nice just to be able to connect with other people as well, because it's all about teamwork. We can only do so much in working in a dental clinic, but it's about collaborating with other people, breath work, body workers, nutritionists, doctors. Like it really is about that teamwork as well. We're all helping the same person at the end of the day. So
is there a date in June yet? Have you got
Friday 28th of June in Manchester, but I'll send a discount code over for the listeners or anyone you want to share that with, Jacko.
Thank you. Okay, we'll put a link in the show notes then, that as well. final thing would be just an opportunity. Is there anything that I'd hate us to have not covered? If there's something that you're like, that, how do I say this? Is there like, is there anything that we haven't covered that is like, people really don't get X, and we haven't said that, you haven't had the chance to say that yet, that's just for you a non-negotiable, an obvious thing, but it's just not obvious to people that have only ever had sort of conventional dentistry? Is there anything left?
I'll let you go first, Annie.
Yeah, so mine would be like children. So getting it right early on can have a huge impact on promoting health for the rest of their life.
Yeah.
So particularly looking at children and their sleep, if you're hearing grinding, snoring, noisy sleep, bedwetting, if you're noticing crowded teeth in like children, crooked teeth, they're struggling to breathe, lots of allergies, mouth breathing. Like there are so many professionals out there who will be able to help and support, and don't feel like you need to wait until they're older. There are simple, straightforward things that can really make a huge difference and a huge impact. So yeah, don't ignore those things, because just some small, simple changes can make a huge difference for life. So.
No, and it really is life-changing work, and I can hear the passion, and it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Seb?
Oh gosh, I'll come from the adult perspective then. And for me, the biological dental thing is, Annie touched on the oral systemic diseases part. So if you've got gum disease, we need to look at the gums, but we need to look at the body, look at the diet, nutrition, the autoimmune kind of reactions that happen in there. If we've got metals in the mouth, is your body reacting to them? There's not really a place for metal in the body apart from iron and copper and a few other things, but no dental material ones, right? So don't have metals in your mouth if you don't need them. Do you have inflammation within the jawbone that goes undiagnosed from the normal way of looking at things because the x-rays aren't big enough to show those things and they don't look at the roots underneath the teeth? Could that be causing, low-grade chronic inflammation that could be caused? I've had patients that have had these things in their jawbone, had one tooth removed that had it, and they've lost all other allergies. They can breathe again effectively. You don't know what's triggering that person.
It's all linked.
And then of course we've talked enough about the airway, because the airways are from Annie and I literally had the conversation yesterday. We said it's all about clenching at nighttime, which we see damage to the teeth in the mouth, and that is airway collapsibility. That's all it is. So it's fascinating stuff.
Well, thank you both for your time tonight, but then also thank you I appreciate you guys are busy, but thank you for also the care you've given me and Catherine, but then also the care that I know you'll be giving to all of your patients and people that are going to come in the door fresh tomorrow. So it's like I say, I can't speak highly enough of the treatment that I had, and really applaud you for what you're doing, and I'll be pushing it hard to get people to engage with your stuff, and also hopefully get some people to the thing in June, 28th of June in Manchester. I do a fair amount of work in Manchester, only a couple of hours away from Manchester. It's easy for me to get to Manchester. Great place, great stuff.
Thank you for everything you're doing, mate. Really getting the message out there and doing all of the, we all have our place, don't we? It's like we all fit into the puzzle to support our patients or clients in the ways that we know helps, right?
And I think it's really thing I like about, and you've done it a number of times, Seb. You've zoomed us out and gone, yes, but then also all these other things as well. And I think we're always gonna have like specialisms. It's just the more that we can see how our specialism fits in with the whole thing, and like Annie said, everything being connected. I don't have to know all of the things, because that can get a bit overwhelming, but just knowing that bit of like knowing what I know and knowing what I don't know, but knowing that I'm within a piece, but my specialism is in a piece of a puzzle. And I think what's really helpful is people to know where they can sort of send people and pinpoint people for stuff that is outside of their remit, but that is important. So these types of conversations, I think, particularly for the coaches that are listening to the podcast, will be really helpful to just widen that out, to going like, you don't have to we don't have to go and be, I'm not going to go and train to be a dentist, but I can just have an appreciation of it, and I'm going to send people to the experts.
Absolutely. And vice versa, right? Vice versa. Buteyko breathing, we send lots of patients to all different ways and looking at these things as well, because that's the foundation at the end of the day. We're just helping remove the interferences to that breathing.
Yeah. No, brilliant. All right, well, thank you so much. If do you want to just give a quick mention for, I'll put them in the show notes, but for social media, for website, for anything else, and I'll put the links in, but just it's nice for people to hear them as well.
So do you want to go first, Annie?
Yeah, so on Instagram at the biological hygienist. So there's details of the conference, but also some other bits and pieces that we do at the clinic on there.
Yeah. Amazing. And then our clinic is called Wonder of Wellness, and it's in Huddersfield. And the website is
Mighty Huddersfield.
Mighty Huddersfield.
The Terriers of the Terriers.
What else so the website wonderofwellness.co.uk gives you an overview of all the dentistry and the courses that we run and offer, and a bit about us, so you can get to know us. And my Instagram is at biological_dentist.
Great. Well, I recommend
that Wonder Wellness as well, isn't there? Wonder Wellness, all one word, I think, the clinic.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we'll make sure we put the links in the show notes for all those. I recommend everyone head over and check them out and give them a follow and check out. If you're in the area and in need of a dentist, it doesn't come any more highly recommended from me as this. So thank you both again for your time. I know you're busy and
Thanks.
it's late at night on what day, I don't even know what day we are. It's Wednesday. Wednesday.
Middle
It
of
means
the
it's a
week.
good week. It's a good week, but I don't even know what it is on Wednesday night. So no, thank you for your time, and I look forward to seeing you in 6 months is typical, isn't it, for a dentist?
Yeah. See you in summer.
I'll see you in a couple of years.
Oh, thanks so much.
Yeah, mate.
There you go, boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen. Annie and Seb from the Wonders of Wellness. You heard me say it right in front of them. I was fanboying and fangirling them a little bit, wasn't I? Couldn't help it though. It's genuine. It's genuine. I'm going to say nothing else other than go and check out what they're doing. Go and check out their Instagrams if you're on Instagram. Go and check out the website. All the links are in the show notes. And it's amazing, life-changing work that they're doing. Go and check it out. Hopefully, 28th of June, I will be able to get my arse and my airway to Manchester for the event that Annie is putting on. And hopefully I'll see you there too, potentially as well, because she said she'd be very lovely to give us a discount code. So check the discount for that in the show notes. And I will see you next week. You've been breathing. I've been Jacko. Till then, keep it nasal.